Spoon could be arguably one of the most consistent, if underrated, bands in rock and roll. Now soon to clock up 30 years in the working unity, their latest release, Lucifer on the Sofa, is their 10th album after 2017's onwards. Today, Indie Minds will take a look at Lucifer, what's on and under that sofa.
G'day everyone, welcome back to this week's episode of Indie Miners. Today we're going to be looking at the 2021 album by Spoon, Lucifer on the Sofa. BJ and I are your hosts, BJ from Melbourne, I'm from Hobart, and BJ, I'm going to hand it over to you for a bit of history. Go for it.
Brilliant. G'day Al, how's it going? Good to see you. So in terms of this album, Spoon are a band I really love. They had, in the first decade of the 2000s, I guess the most consistent run of critically acclaimed albums, even beating the likes of Radiohead and the White Stripes. If we move forward to 2022, this year, with this particular album, it was one of the most anticipated albums that people were looking to purchase with new material coming out. It was recorded in Austin, Texas, which is their hometown. Historically, in recent times, they had been recording in LA. The band had about 30 songs to record of it, was delayed in relation to COVID, so that delay resulted in more songs to choose from. And in terms of the album itself, when it got released, it did make it into the outer echelons of the top 40 around the world. Did best in Germany, not so well in Japan. But Al, in summary, really looking forward to getting into this album. I really enjoyed listening to it. It is an album that is really back to some of the sounds that they were producing in the early part of this century.
Oh, BJ, couldn't agree more, mate. Look, I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed this album. Probably at 5 listens in now, and we could definitely name our kind of top tracks. I really think it harks back to a lot of their earlier stuff, but I'd be interested to hear what you think the top 3 tracks are. We can have a bit of a chat about that, starting at number 3. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that absolutely. So the third, I guess my third favourite album is the very first track off the record called Held. This track, it's very sort of a moody piece, and it does remind me of their 2010 album Transference, which it happens to be my favourite album. So I'm not sure what you thought about it. I know that you're liking some of their other albums probably after 2010, but this one was very sort of similar to that type of sound and that mood that they were going for.
Oh, absolutely, mate. I mean, straight away from the riff at the very start, I kind of thought, this is just going to be a great album, classic kind of Spoon. As you know, my personal favourite album is They Want Their Soul, and absolutely rocking album. But this is such a great title track to kick off the album. And heading into number 2, what are your thoughts?
Number two, On the Radio, I think, is one of my favourite albums. It does have a bit of a rocking tune, especially with the piano. They're hitting the keys really hard in it, so it's a really fun song to listen to. That was almost your favourite, wasn't it?
That's one of my favourites off the album. It's the piano just reminds me of being almost in a country and western kind of saloon, actually. That kind of a drunken bloke at the end of the bar playing the piano, and to me, it's probably one of the most radio-friendly songs off the album. If you were to hear it on the radio, pardon the pun. That takes us to number 1, BJ. What are your thoughts? What's number 1 for you off this album?
Drum roll. So my favourite tune is Lucifer on the Sofa, so the very last track of the album, the title track on the album. This one, again, it does remind me of some of their earlier records, in particular Gimme Fiction and the other one from 2001, Girls Can Tell. So I've almost forgotten about it, but it's got a different sort of a more of a moody piece, so similar to the first track as well. Very enjoyable listen, and again, it seems like they are going into sort of different territory that they might have gone into in their last few records.
Yeah, brilliant. So that's our top 3 tracks from this album. I did throw a few extra ones in there, and we had a bit of a robust conversation before, but it actually leads us to the big question. Are Spoon one of the most underrated bands on the planet? And before I throw it over to you, BJ, I'm going to say they are. They are massively underrated. They're one of my favourite indie bands of all time. BJ, I'd be interested to get your thoughts on that statement.
You see, I reckon they'd be definitely in the conversation. They've been around for 30 years and they're still producing records that are top notch. And I was looking back at some of the 60s bands and what they were doing in the 90s. And really, you know, if you look at bands like the Rolling Stones, for example, like they don't play any of their 90s songs. I mean, they're very much, when they played for the last 15 years, they're very much focused on their 60s and 70s hits. This band, Spoon, seems to be able to provide to do a very good job at just being relevant for a long period of time. So all 10 albums have got something that is worth listening to, and I don't know. I think that this particular album sort of just goes to show that there are certainly songs off this record that I can see them playing not only at concerts now, but also into the future.
Yep, absolutely, BJ. I think this is one that I'm really looking forward to seeing live, maybe at KEXP, being recorded in high quality, and just sitting back, having a beer, watching it on YouTube. BJ, it's time for that part of the show where we're going to look at the ratings. What did you give it out of 5, mate?
Look, I'm going to give it a 4. I'm going to give it a 4. I was toying with it as a 4.5 record, and maybe over time I might reserve the right to upgrade this rating. But I thought that it was a very robust album. It feels like there's not a lot of records that are being made like this these days, where you feel like you can put it on repeat. So very, very happy that Spoon are back after 5 years producing material like this. What did you think?
Yeah, look, I'm going to give it a 4 as well. I originally had it at 3.5 after the first few listens, to be honest, but then after listening to it and the flow of the album from the start to the end, I just thought this is a really solid album. So I'm hoping our listeners out there will give it a listen. I'm giving it a 4. You're giving it a 4. We're going to wrap up the show now. We both believe that Spoon are an underrated band. We very much hope that you listen, you enjoy, and you hit that like and subscribe button and join us for the next Indie Miners. Thanks so much for watching. Cheers, BJ.